cancer genetics, hereditary disease, genes, genetics, genomics, all those words that get thrown around a lot, we're going to try and demystify today.
Hi, I'm Hayley and this is Susan, and welcome to Cancer Research Demystified. Today we're going to talk about cancer genetics. So the language surrounding this concept can be a bit of a minefield. There's loads of sort of new words that can kind of sound the same or similar. So we're going to start off with a sort of glossary, dictionary, and our first word is
gene. So your body is made up of cells, and the genes are inside your cells, and they contain information that the cell needs to work properly. So each gene is a specific instruction for the cell, and the actual chemical that makes up these genes is something that you've probably heard of, DNA.
So our second word is mutation. So a mutation is when those instructions we talked about get changed. Those changes can maybe not affect the cell at all because the instruction isn't really changed, or it can be quite a big change that has some quite significant consequences for how that cell works.
So the next word is genetic, and this just means anything that relates to your genes, or we also say your genetic code. You also might hear your genome, and that's that full picture of your personal genetic code. So they kind of all roughly say the same thing.
Okay, our next word, hereditary. So hereditary means something that you inherit from your parents. So this could be things we're familiar with talking about, hair colour, height, eye colour, but it can also be things inside you that you don't see. And what you're actually inheriting is a set of instructions. The instructions that are in your parents' cells are similar to the instructions that are in your cells. So you're inheriting those genes.
Right, so sometimes people will say the word genetic when actually what they mean is hereditary. So not everything that's genetic is inherited directly from your parents. It just means something to do with your genes.
So what do all these words have to do with cancer? What do genes have to do with cancer? Is cancer even genetic?
So yes, all cancer is genetic, though not necessarily hereditary, because cancer is always to do with those genes within your cells. They're always something to do with those instructions in the cells going a little bit wrong.
So it can be the case that the cells in your body are doing all the right things, they've got all the right instructions, you're working normally. But at some point in your life, the instructions change, and that cell goes wrong, it changes, it can start to act uncontrollably and can go on and cause cancer.
So these sudden changes, they can be mutations. They can either happen completely randomly, or they can be to do with some sort of environmental factors. So something you eat or drink, all the things that you hear about in the news about causing cancer, like sunbathing,
Smoking.
yeah, smoking, not exercising enough, all that sort of thing.
Obesity.
Yeah. So this relationship about all these different things that cause cancer is very, very complicated, and it's a whole area of research in itself.
So some of these changes in the instructions, some of these mutations, are actually in your cells your whole life. These are the hereditary ones, these are the ones you inherit from your parents, and some of them are connected to cancer. So the most famous example is in a gene called BRCA, and that's a gene that often carries these cancer-related mutations.
That's the one that Angelina Jolie had, right? So
Right.
that's one of the reasons why it's famous.
So should we be scared of these genes then?
Yes and no, not all mutations are created equally, just to make things even more complicated again. Some of them give a much greater risk of cancer than others.
So the reason why this is the case is for two reasons really. So the first one is some of these genes are more important to the functioning of the cell than others. So some of these changes won't cause cancer, won't cause you any problems.
Right, and the other reason is that the mutations themselves can sometimes have a really big effect on that gene or a really small effect on that gene, and it doesn't really matter.
Okay, so you have 37 trillion cells in your body, ish. I got a few more than Susan, I'm a bit taller. In each of these, there is about 30,000 different genes with these different instructions telling your cells what to do. And each one of those genes can have hundreds of thousands, if not more, different places they could have these mutations.
So it's a little bit complicated.
It's a little bit complicated.
So because of all of these reasons why it's so complicated, all the genes, all the cells, all the mutations, your personal risk of cancer is very, very difficult to work out.
Okay, so the way it kind of works is, in reality, it's an accumulation of lots of little mutations, lots of different changes all through your cells, all through the genome, and this accumulates over time and can lead to this higher risk of cancer. So we're going to try and show you this in an interesting way, we think. Hopefully try and explain it to you, so we'll be right back.
Okay, so let's simplify things a bit. These bottles represent different people's risks of developing cancer. We're going to fill them up bit by bit, and once they're full, that person has developed cancer. So generally the bottles don't start completely empty. That's because there's some hereditary mutations, meaning there's already a bit of a risk of cancer from the start, and everyone has a different amount in their bottle to begin with.
So over time, random mutations begin to accumulate as a person gets older. This is something that happens naturally, can't be stopped, and the extent to which each mutation increases the risk is really unpredictable, and this makes things even more complicated than they already are.
So lifestyle factors, as we said, can also lead to mutations. So for example, how healthy your diet is, how much exercise you get, and as we all know, smoking is a big one, so that adds a lot to the bottle.
So research is trying to better understand how to prevent high-risk change, so when a lot of the liquid is entering this bottle at once. But we're also trying to find ways to see how full the bottle actually is. So screening programs are ways to try and act as early warning systems that your bottle is about to overflow.
So is this a one-way street, or can I pour some liquid back out of my cup? Well, in some cases you actually can. So for example, earlier we mentioned BRCA mutations. Some women have changes in BRCA that mean they have a fuller cup from the very beginning, meaning they have a higher risk of developing breast cancer. So they can actually opt to remove their breasts as a preventative measure. In other words, losing some of that liquid back out of the bottle.
We can't change how many hereditary changes there were at the beginning, and we can't change those random mutations and how quickly they fill up our cup. But we can slow down the lifestyle factor mutations. It's complicated, and we don't yet understand how everything we do affects the risk. And obviously we can't live in darkness, eat nothing, but some of the things we know about and some of the riskier factors can be stopped, and they can make a big difference. So smoking, obesity.
So it does get more complicated again, believe it or not, when you remember what we said earlier, that there are 37 trillion cells in your body, and actually each one of these cells could be thought of as an individual bottle.
So this general concept of cancer risk genetics has been known about for a while, but it's only recently that the technology has got so good and so accessible that cancer researchers like us can actually get our hands on it and really start to understand that complexity. So we're starting to look at ways we can detect cancer earlier, treat it, and even prevent it, which would be great. So there are tools where they're using this idea to calculate your risk, and we're getting better and better, and we hope there'll be a monumental change within our lifetime about how this information and how this works to help protect you.
So all this new understanding is not only helping us to better understand risk, but also to develop a whole new way to treat cancer. So these genetic changes are completely different from one cancer to another, and the more that this research develops and drives, it's helping us to understand that we should actually treat each cancer differently. So we're entering this whole new era. It's called personalised medicine, where we really hope that one day we can tailor the right specific treatment to each specific cancer patient, because we better understand those genetic changes. Okay, so that's all for this episode. As usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. You can also now reach us pretty much anywhere on the internet. We've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, obviously YouTube. We'll see you anywhere you want to ask questions. Please ask us. Any ideas for future videos, of course we want to make them, and let's have a chat.